Welcome back to the E4 Explicit podcast. I'm Corey, and today we have Allan Lichtman, who is a one of the head professors at American, I believe.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. So tell me a little bit about yourself, Allan, and then we'll dive into some other things.
I'm distinguished professor of history at American University in Washington, D.C. I grew up on the hard scrabble streets of Brooklyn,
Nice.
where I learned to run and fight. But I much preferred to run, so I became a college runner at Brandeis and continued my running experience after school. And I was an age group North American champion in the 3,000 meter steeplechase, a race designed for horses, but occasionally run by very foolish people like myself. So I was undergraduate at Brandeis. Got my PhD at Harvard University. I hate to say it, in 1973 when I was 9. In American history with a specialty in politics and the quantitative analysis of historical information. And I've been at American University ever since then, although I did spend a year at the California Institute of Technology in 1981, where I developed what became my keys to the White House system, developed it in collaboration with we were a very odd couple, Vladimir Keilis-Borok from Moscow, the world's leading authority in earthquake prediction, but we can tell you that story. I also figured, I'm a young man near Hollywood, coming from the East Coast. What do? You go on a quiz show. So I went on Tic-Tac-Doe with Wink Martindale, and defeated 20 opponents, won over $100,000 in cash and prizes.
What?
True story. It sounds great, though, until I tell you all my hassles with the IRS. But I was the big quiz show money winner.
Wow.
Of 1981. I actually had fan clubs. Unfortunately, it was like junior high school girls and,
Oh, my God. That is crazy. Whoa.
It was crazy. For a while, I was a real...
Holy shit.
The other thing I've done is an expert witness, get this, in some 100 civil rights cases, all the big cases in Texas, North Carolina, Florida, Wisconsin, California, you name it.
Yeah.
And I've written 11 or 12 books, depending on how you count. Some of them co-authored, and they range across a wide spectrum of U.S. history. My most recent books, one that got a lot of attention, of course, was The Case for Impeachment.
Yes.
I deal with non-controversial topics. My next book was The Embattled Vote in America, from the Founding to the Present. Mm-hmm. And then my least controversial book, Repeal the Second Amendment, The Case for a Safer America.
That was sarcasm, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And most recently, the 7th edition of my book on the keys to the White House, My Prediction System, has come out, predicting the next president. The Keys to the White House, 2020. I have 2 children,
Nice.
Very different. My daughter is a psychiatrist in my hometown of Brooklyn. But I got to tell you, she lives in Williamsburg. Williamsburg today is not the Williamsburg when I grew up in the 1950s.
Yep, I lived in Brooklyn for 4 years.
So
I didn't live it in the 50s, but I lived it in like 2014, 15 up until like 17 or something like that. And
how gentrified it had become.
It's correct. I was in Bed-Stuy. I lived in Bed-Stuy.
That's amazing, yeah.
It's insane. I mean, I would have people tell me like, listen, 10 years ago, you couldn't walk down the street.
Oh, no.
I was like taken back by it. It was very interesting, but.
I grew up in Brownsville, actually. So.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, very tough neighborhood. But I loved it. I actually went to Stuyvesant High School. I had to take the subway for an hour every day. So my son is a Master's in Fine Arts graduate from Emerson College,
Nice.
Dean Scholar, filmmaker, award-winning filmmaker.
Nice.
And I have a very interesting wife. My wife is Karen Strickler, one of the nation's leading grassroots political organizers. She headed Maryland NARAL in Maryland when they codified Roe versus Wade back in the 90s. So no matter what the Supreme Court does, the women of Maryland are protected today. She heads Vote Climate PAC US, which is devoted to fighting climate change.
Sure.
She's also a 6-foot blonde Ironman triathlete. The Ironman triathlon is a 2.4-mile swim, 112-mile bike, and a 26.2-mile run.
Good God.
And I'm a 5'6" Jewish boy from Brooklyn.
Complete opposites. That's amazing. That's cool, man.
Very thumbnail sketch of who I am.
Yeah, that was detailed, and I appreciate that, because that way people can kind of, see you for not just the books you write and the fact that you're a professor, but other things, that you're an actual human being and you have family, and you won a lot of money on a game show. Speaking of, you're talking to another game host, our game contestant. I was on The Price is Right with Bob Barker and won a car. So
awesome.
Yeah, Bob's my boy. So anyway, yeah, it was. I don't have any fan clubs though. All my fan clubs would have been probably 80 years old and up, but I'll take what
I was much younger when I was on this show.
Yeah. All right, cool. So definitely want to talk about your books for sure. I think we'll end probably with kind of like what your prediction is. If you've come out with your prediction already, right?
Yes, my prediction is out. Again, exclusive to New York Times. I don't know if you saw the video.
I didn't on purpose. I don't like to know a lot.
Good idea. But you can check it out when we're done. It's on YouTube.
Yeah, definitely. So and if you want to give me a little synopsis of like what you think is going to happen, and I'll give you my prediction first, and you'll see if I'm close or not. But I kind of wanted to talk about what caught my eye with you was your latest book was Repeal the Second Amendment, which I found interesting. I haven't been able to read it yet, but I did some because on Amazon they have like quick looks and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I was like reading into that and stuff like that, but I was just so blown away because I have a lot of people that I talk to on the podcast, left, right. I mean, I talked to like a friend of mine who's one of Clinton's executive assistants when he was in the White House. I talked to Gary Byrne, who I don't know if you've heard him before, but super right wing, like whatever. And I talk to everyone because I'm very neutral just off the bat. I have always voted Democrat. I've always been left wing, but I find as I've gotten older, certain things that fit my lifestyle, that certain things that are important to me that I never realized as I got older have changed a little bit, I think. And I think the media plays a lot into that. But I was just curious of like what your kind of stance is on a lot of these topics that are so controversial and hard to have a conversation with, because I don't think both sides really know what they're talking. I think the right has a hard time with the left not using the right terms and understanding what things really mean, and vice versa, and the left really just wanting to kind of like solve it simply. And it's not.
I can talk about that book a little bit, but I just want to make one aside. We can talk about it later.
Sure.
Became great friends with someone you would never expect. I'm a pretty liberal Jewish guy in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, you're pretty liberal. Yeah.
But I developed a friendship with none other than Lee Atwater. I don't know if you know who Lee Atwater is. He was Karl Rove before there was a Karl Rove, and Karl Rove was kindergarten compared to Lee Atwater. He was political director of the Reagan White House.
Yeah.
Anyway, I was inspired to write this book by an op-ed by the late, great Justice John Paul Stevens, who wrote an op-ed on why we need to repeal the Second Amendment. I really hadn't thought about it until I was inspired by Justice Stevens. Then I began to look into it. And the first thing that struck me was, if you believe the NRA and the gun lobby, we should be essentially the safest country among peer nations by far, because we have all these guns for self-defense. And then when I looked at it, I'm a quantitative historian, so I do math. And I did an analysis of a comparison between gun deaths in the US and those in our closest peer nations, the G7 group of nations, the other major industrial democracies, Russia and Australia. And what I found was gun murders in the US per capita, adjusting for population, were more than 20 times greater than in the G7 group of nations plus Australia. Not 20%, but 20 times greater. That we uniquely stand out, not just for gun murders, but also gun suicides. People don't realize there are many more gun suicides per year in the US, about 23,000, than there are gun murders, about 15,000.
Agreed.
Well, we're 7 times more likely per capita to have gun suicides, but 40% less likely to have suicides by any other means. And then I look back at the origins. Conservatives always talk about the origins of the Second Amendment. And I found that the conservative, or at least the gun lobby version of the Second Amendment, just doesn't hold up. There is not a single person, not one, involved in drafting, passing, or ratifying the Second Amendment that ever said this amendment guarantees an individual right to keep and bear arms, as opposed to a collective right to maintain a well-regulated
militia. Sure.
And contrary to the notion that the Second Amendment was designed to arm ordinary citizens to rise up against their government, quite the opposite. The Second Amendment was used to arm the militia, and under George Washington and John Adams, used to put down uprisings like Freeze Rebellion and the Whiskey Rebellion. But the clincher for me was this. Who framed the Second Amendment? James Madison, slaveholder. Second Amendment wouldn't have gone anywhere without the support of the slave states. Do you think for one brief second, James Madison and all of those other slaveholders would have voted for an amendment that gave a right to bear arms to Black people?
Yeah, no, definitely not.
Not a chance. But guess what? Guess who doesn't serve in the militia? Black people.
Mm-hmm.
They don't serve in the militia until the Civil War. So by tying it to the well-regulated militia, you put arms in the hands of the slave patrollers,
sure,
but not to flee
slaves,
even free Black
not free. So that makes sense.
And then I looked at many other things. The NRA is now being sued.
Oh, really?
New York, because it's misusing its funds. It's paying huge salaries and lavish trips and wardrobes to its executives while stiffing its lower level employees. Well, I have a whole chapter about how the NRA has since become a racket. But that's what that book is all about. The other thing I point out is, some of my best friends said I shouldn't write this book because it just gives ammunition to the gun lobby. You want to take away our guns. Repealing the Second Amendment doesn't mean taking away your guns.
Yeah, okay.
The amendment never interpreted as an individual right to bear arms until the Heller case in 2010. Talking about, 200 years.
Yeah, 200, yeah, a long time.
Nobody took away anyone and confiscate guns.
Sure. Yeah, it wasn't like Australia, like the buyback and stuff like that.
Yeah, on the side of gun control, your movement has gone nowhere. It's gone backwards. We've repealed the assault weapons ban. We've passed nothing at the national level since the Clinton administration. We passed the kind of exemption for gun manufacturers and gun sellers to be sued. The game needs to be changed. You can't keep using your old slogan of "we support the Second Amendment," but it doesn't work. So that's my argument.
No, those are all good points. I wanted to know, like, as far as like to your first point of like the numbers, right? Like the G7 and stuff like that. Do you think possibly it could be because of like the populations of us, where we have 320 million and some other, Pennsylvania is the size of or bigger than most countries in the world. So do you think, I don't know. I'm literally asking. I don't know.
No, first of all, combined, those countries are much larger, but Japan's a very big country.
Yeah, Germany, a lot of people. Yeah,
there's a lot of people in Japan, Germany. So we're not talking. There was, these are for the most part pretty large nations. Yeah, Canada or Australia are there, but you're talking about Japan, Germany, France, Italy, very substantial nations.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I just didn't.
I also control. The gun controllers say, well, it's bad video games or mental health. I control them. All these countries have mental health problems, some even more than the U.S.
I agree.
They all have violent video games. Japan's kind of the home of video games.
Yeah.
You know how many gun murders there were in Japan in the last reporting period? Three compared to 15,000 in the U.S., which has about 3 times the population. So per capita, that's 9 versus 15,000.
Do they have guns? Are they allowed to have guns in Japan?
They have a incredibly strict gun control.
They're pretty strict with that. Yeah.
They're probably the strictest in the world. But, other countries aren't as extreme. But as I said, on average, per capita, we're more than 20 times more likely, an American is 20 times more likely to be murdered by a gun, 7 times more likely to have suicide committed by guns. And by the way, gun suicides are fundamentally different from, things like slashing or poisoning. The vast majority of those suicides don't succeed. It's a funny word to use, but I mean, the person survived. 90% of those using guns don't survive, and guns take no premeditation. You got a gun in the house, you can commit suicide in 3 seconds.
Yeah, I've had quite a few friends do commit suicide in multiple ways, and I mean, none of them lived, obviously, but like it was definitely, I think about that a lot as far as the gun suicide versus the the murder and stuff like that. Now, do you think that like the fact that like, yes, we're 3 times larger than Japan and stuff like that, they have strict gun laws, but do you think that like, because we have 400 million guns, we have 320 million people, it's obvious that our numbers are going to be higher than everyone else, and especially the way that Americans are in general, where we're very American, we're very like, let's stick to our roots and stuff like that. The Second Amendment, I think personally, as of late, the Constitution and some things that we have has showed its age. Personally, I think it is time to kind of refine some things. But I'm glad to hear you say though, because to tell you what, when I read the cover of your book, I was like, all right, he's gonna want to like get rid of they're gonna come for my guns and blah blah.
Hell no.
I know.
I'm talking about things like assault weapons bans, universal background checks, permits, things that would be opened up. We just had the liberal Ninth Circuit, because of the Second Amendment, invalidate a ban on high caliber magazines. Who in the world needs a 30 caliber magazine? The only thing that's designed for is mass killing.
30 round mag, you mean?
Yeah. 30 round magazine. Yeah. So, and that brings me to my next point though, to where I think everything you're saying, obviously you're a stats person, you have all the analytical things. I think that having the conversation and knowing what we're all talking about, because personally, listen, I didn't even get in. I'm not like a huge gun guy, just so you know. I just got into it actually about 1.5 years ago. I moved to North Carolina. Go figure. And I was like, me and my girlfriend were like, you know what, for 4th of July, let's just do something different. So we went to this gun range, and I was like, in my head, I'm like, all right, we're going to go in there. It's going to be a bunch of gun-toting rednecks. They're going to be like, listen here, Yankee, because I'm a northern guy compared to North Carolina. And, it was the complete opposite experiences I had. I was blown away with the knowledge, the way that they took care of the safety and everything. And it changed my perspective on what I thought those people were like. Because that's all I see on the media is everybody saying at the Capitol. Let me follow that up with 2 things.
Sure.
One, gun owners support things like universal background check.
Agree.
Weapon. It's the gun lobby, which is in cahoots with the gun manufacturers and pays its CEO well over $1 million plus all these perks.
Yes, I agree with you on that. 100%.
So, and a lot of the gun owners are now very unhappy with the gun lobby and the NRA.
Yeah, no, I can totally see that. And I think that those big tabloids and those big taglines of we're going to take your guns and this and that, that's really what kind of scares people. But I think you are right when it comes to that, where as a gun owner, I want people to be, it terrifies me when COVID happened and all these people that didn't like guns went and started buying guns because they wanted to protect themselves all of a sudden. I was worried because I'm like, I'm actually glad like California has a 7-day or 10-day buying period. Like I wish you had to take a class and shoot that gun before you buy it. Because I don't want you to just buy a gun. New York State
requires that, for example.
New York State does. There's a bunch of states. But you know what I mean? Like as a gun owner, I feel safer if other gun owners are trained at the very least to kind of handle that in a certain situation versus let me just go buy some guns. And then if I ever have to use it, I'm going to kill someone else and not even defend myself.
Couple of points. One, having a gun in the house, precisely because of the kinds of things you're talking about, doesn't make you safer. You're more likely to commit violence or suicide than you are to protect yourself from someone, breaking into your house. The other thing is, one other thing my research uncovered, I looked at every single identifiable murder in the United States. And here's what I found. Taking out, gang warfare and drug warfare, just looking at ordinary citizens, you are most likely to be killed by someone you know. not by some, crazed
Random.
criminal breaking into your house. And the vast majorities of murders come out of arguments where people get hot
Domestic
and have
disputes.
a gun.
Yeah, no, I agree with that too. And I think that's a valid point as well, aside, but also at the same time, like, I feel like if I am trained to do something, if I am in the right mental state, that's why I think the mental health of a lot of these things, because let's be honest, these mass shooters, these people, these criminals, whoever's going to commit a crime, isn't a school. Oh, this is a gun-free school zone. Okay. And you know what I mean? They're not going to say, well, I couldn't get this gun, because most of these school shootings are some of them have been bought, but most of them are stolen from family members and other things that they go and then use on these schools. So like, how can we save a school without having some sort of like, a border there, as far as like a law enforcement officer or somebody, or even armed I'm not saying the armed teachers. I'm just saying like that was brought. I know that was brought up though. That's a thing.
Yeah.
But
Look,
you know what I mean.
Someone comes spewing in
Sure.
with an assault weapon
With an AR, yeah.
a 50 round magazine. I don't care who's there. You're not going to stop it. You've got to keep these guns out of the hands of those kinds of persons. And in many cases, the family members shouldn't have had the guns either.
In general.
They weren't properly vetted, properly trained.
That's true. I agree with that too. A lot of when you look back on like the what's his name, the kid in Connecticut, when the one he stole his guns from his mom. His mom was mentally, like she wasn't. How did she get those guns? And I think
the thing is, you can kill a dozen people in less than a minute with one of those guns, because they can fire 40 rounds in a minute.
Yeah. No, I agree. I'm not trying to talk about guns all the time. I was just curious.
We got a lot of other stuff.
All right. So tell me about like the, I see you tweeting a lot and this and that about Trump. So as far as like how he won in 2016, do you kind of see the same kind of formula that he's using in 2020 against Biden and Kamala? Because I think personally that this is probably the biggest vice president pick in a very long time, I think, because Biden is, did I lose you? No, you're still there. I hear you. It's all good.
Someone's calling in. I'm going to decline it. All right, we're okay.
You're good. So I think picking a good vice was important for Biden, because whether he's going to make a second term or even make a first term, I think the second or the vice president should have been a strong pick. I don't know about Kamala Harris, because I think it's odd that like she was calling him a racist during the debates and now they're best buddies. But do you think that them picking Kamala is going to give Trump even more ammunition? Do you think?
First of all, it's very common to pick a vice president who attacked you.
Sure, of course, yeah.
George H.W. Bush said of Ronald Reagan, "Your plan is voodoo economics." Lyndon Johnson said of John F. Kennedy, "You're not ready."
Yeah, so it's common. Okay.
So there's no issue with that. Now, I'm going to have to give you a bigger answer.
Okay.
I have a prediction system.
Yes.
The keys to the White House. And the fundamental insight behind that prediction system is that American presidential elections are basically votes up or down on the strength and performance of the party holding the White House. In other words, do you guys deserve 4 more years or not? And there's very little the challenger has to do with it. And the way my system works is if 6 or more of the 13 keys go against the party holding the White House, they lose. These are big picture things. Sure. Midterm elections, third parties, long and short-term economy, scandals, social unrest, policy change, foreign policy successes and failures. And in 2016, I predicted that Donald Trump would win because the incumbent Democrats had exactly 6 keys against them. It was the toughest call I ever had to make. And you can imagine, did not make me very popular in 90% plus Democratic Washington.
Yeah.
In my study, right over my shoulder there, I have a note written on the Washington Post in September where I made my call, and it says, "Professor, congrats, good call," and in big Sharpie letters, Donald J. The problem, though, is he recognized my prediction but he did not understand the insight behind the prediction, which is that it's governing, not campaigning, that counts.
Mm.
And when you are the incumbent president, you are going to be judged by your record, not by what you say. So he can't revert to his 2016 strategy because he was the challenger then.
Got it.
And it didn't matter what he said. That's why even the Access Hollywood tape did not doom him.
Wow. I always wondered that because I'm like, when you say grab him by the pussy and it's audio and the other guy got fired and nothing happened. Like when he was running, I couldn't believe what we were watching. I was blown away. Like at first when he came out, I was like, this guy's a joke. There's no way Donald Trump is going to be here we are 4 years later and he's the president. So what you're saying is what he did in his past, not his past, like in his past as a president in the last 3 or 4 years will determine whether he's going to win or not. And I talked to two historical political historians, Anthony Davies, and who's an economist, and James Harrigan, who's a political historian. And he was telling me that the numbers are in favor of Biden and all this stuff. And that like no other president, I think besides like in World War II, has made a second term when the economy is in such like turmoil and stuff like that. So that's kind of what I was thinking. I was like, there's no way he's going to dig himself out of it. But now thinking of like your keys and how your process works, that makes actual total sense. That like
and not limited to the economy. You know, if we
exactly
were
yeah
judged by the economy alone, Clinton should have won going away.
Sure.
Because the economy was quite good in 2000. You know, there was no recession, nowhere near.
Yeah, 16 was fine.
Wasn't like 1932 or
sure. Yeah.
or 1992.
Tell me about your like tell me the process. Like it doesn't have to be long-winded, but like tell me the process of how you determine, because you've been right ever since what, 1981?
I made my first prediction in April 1982 of Ronald Reagan's re-election during what was then the worst recession since the Great Depression. So I've been right since then. We can talk a little bit about a hiccup in 2000 where you had that basically a stolen election.
Florida. Yeah,
stolen.
I know. Yeah.
You know, but you know, I think I was right. But you know, yes, I've been right basically.
So how does it work? How did you come up with this? I know you worked with the seismic.
You know, I'd love to tell you I came up with it because I'm so brilliant and foresightful. But if I were to tell you that, Corey, to quote the late, not so great Richard Nixon, that would be wrong. Remember I told you I was a visiting distinguished scholar at Caltech in 1981 where I was the quiz show champ. Well, I also met this guy whose name was Vladimir Keilis-Borok from Moscow, the world's leading authority on earthquake prediction. And he said to me, we are going to collaborate. And again, being so incredibly insightful, my answer was, no, we're not. Earthquakes may be a big deal here in Southern California. I have to go back to American University in Washington, D.C. Nobody cares.
We don't have those. Yeah, we don't have those
right?
here.
Yeah. And he says, no, I don't want to collaborate on earthquakes. I already solved that. Yeah, right. He said, get this. This is incredible. He said in 1963, he was a member of the Soviet scientific delegation that came to Washington, D.C. under President Kennedy and negotiated the most important treaty in the history of the world.
What?
The Nuclear Test Ban Treaty.
He was there?
He was there. That kept us from poison. He's since passed away. He was much older than me. That kept us from poisoning the atmosphere, the oceans, and the grasses. The reason young people like you are still here. And he said, I fell in love with politics in Washington. And I always wanted to use the methods of earthquake prediction to predict elections. But look, I live in the Soviet Union. Elections? It's supreme leader. Off with your head. No. You know all about American politics and the most important elections, American presidential elections. So we became the odd couple, as you can imagine, of political research. And the key was to reconceptualize presidential elections in geophysical terms. Remember, this is 1981, not as Carter versus Reagan, not as Republican versus Democrat, not as liberal versus conservative, but as stability. The party holding the White House keeps it. And earthquake, the party holding the White House is turned out. And, Using that model, we looked at every American presidential election from 1860, the horse and buggy days when Lincoln was elected,
Sure.
to 1980, guided by my insight that elections were basically votes up or down on the strength and performance of the party holding the White House. And that research led us to discover these 13 key factors and our decision rule of 6 negative factors and the White House party loses. That's how it all started.
40 That's crazy. Years ago. And you've been aside from Florida, but like that's so interesting to me that you guys, why did he want to come up with something like that to kind of predict and kind of like know in advance?
Yeah, he wanted a bigger stage for his prediction methods. He wanted something spectacular, and he got it. You know, we became very well known. And I think I alluded to this, but I'll tell you the full story. After I published that article in April 1982, using the system we developed, I get this call from a man with a deep Southern accent. And he says, Professor Lichtman, this is Lee Atwater calling, political director of the Ronald Reagan White House. We want you to come to the White House. And I said, well, I'm not sure you got the right guy. My guy. And he says, no, we know who you are. So I go to the White House and I meet everybody, you know, the vice president, attorney general, chat with Lee. The very end of the day, he didn't invite me there to have me meet anyone. The very end of the day, he looks me in the eye and discloses the real reason he brought me there. He says, Professor Lichtman, what would happen if Ronald Reagan didn't run again in 1984? Perfectly reasonable question, right? For a guy in the 70s. And I said, I'm going to tell it to you straight. You read my article. You're down 3 keys. Sure predicted win. Takes 6 keys to count you out. But look what happens if Reagan doesn't run again. You obviously lose the incumbency key. You lose the internal party contest key because Bush and Kemp and Robertson are going to fight like crazy.
Yeah.
That's 5. And then without the Gipper, you lose the charisma key.
Yeah.
You know, George Bush, charismatic. It's about as exciting as a
Passaic
shopping
wet
center.
Blanket. Yeah.
So, Mr. Atwater, you go from a sure win with 3 keys down to a predicted loss with 6 keys down. Atwater looks me in the eye and says, thank you so much, Professor Lichtman, and the rest is history.
Wow.
And Lee and I became friends, even though we're
complete opposites.
Different ends of the political spectrum. And I'm mentioned in his fascination with the keys in his biography called Bad Boy. And you may know he died tragically very young and recanted all of his dirty tricks on his deathbed.
That's amazing. I didn't know that. That's so cool. That's cool that, but that's interesting that someone on that side had the kind of like foresight to see and ask you, someone who has kind of got it down to a science and who has been, you know, who obviously in the future has been right every year. That's so interesting that they would reach out to you.
Before I even had been right. And that's one of the great things, you know, if you're going to be a successful in politics, is to recognize what you don't know,
right?
And in turn to help you know it.
Right.
That's something, you know, Donald Trump has never learned. He thinks he knows everything.
Of course.
Himself knows more about war than the generals. You know, more about technology than the scientists.
Yeah, no, there's definitely a lot of points that I'm like, it's, oh my God, it's like a reality show. It's so freaking crazy. But do you think so? Obviously, your wife is an activist. You're an activist, no?
No, I'm not involved in. I was, but I haven't been involved in politics for 15 years. I stay out of it because of my expert witness work, and I want to keep politics out of my predictions. Look, here's the secret to forecasting. The hardest thing in being a successful forecaster is not knowing history, although you got no history. It's not knowing math, or you got no math. It's not knowing politics, although you got no politics. It's keeping your personal political preferences out of it. If I just voted by political preferences, I'd be useless as a forecaster.
Sure.
I'd be wrong half the time. But going into 2020, I've called 4 Republicans and 5 Democrats. That mathematically is as close to equality as you can get. And I always tell people, these are predictions, not endorsements.
Sure. No, that makes
People have
sense.
trouble understanding that, but I
Yeah.
tell them that.
Yeah, yeah, that's really what it is. But whether they take it, it's up to them. Do you think that the because the conversation I had before with one of my other guests was I was confused of why the Democratic Party also, for one, let Bernie just kind of walk again, but also why they didn't pick, I feel like, a very, very strong candidate either in Tulsi Gabbard or Andrew Yang or somebody that was new, that wasn't, hasn't been in politics for 40, 50 years, that was new blood and, checked all the boxes, like a Tulsi Gabbard. She's a woman of color, she's a veteran, she's a politician, she's all these great things. But I don't know, I just thought it was odd that they went with Biden.
Safety. They went with what they thought was the sure thing.
Sure.
With Biden. They didn't want to take a chance. They thought, they had a good chance to win. And rightly or wrongly, and I'm not sure it was right, but their belief was go with the safe choice.
So two of the biggest names, basically, and we'll swing for the fences.
Yeah. And I agree with you. I think Kamala was a great pick, not because I think she's going to swing the election, but for two reasons. One, the guy's 77. You got to think, unfortunately, about the possibility of the vice president becoming president.
Yeah.
And she's qualified, having been attorney general of the biggest state in the union, a senator, very smart. And then the other thing, as a multiracial woman, she's the future of the country. Look, the Republican base is old white guys like me.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you can't manufacture more old white guys. You can't make us live to be 150. We're moving towards a multiracial society. And I mean a majority minority society. And, Pence and Trump are not the future. Kamala is the future.
Yeah, no, I agree with that for sure. Do you think that aside from like the politics part of it, with everything that's going on, like the injustice and all this, like, do you think it's been like a really, really hard, is it harder to live nowadays than it was, do you think, back in the day, as far as like the racial injustice where like cops, blue lives matter, black lives matter, all these like big slogans that are really popular on one side or the other?
Things were vastly worse than this in the Jim Crow era.
Oh, yeah.
In the Jim Crow era, no one even noticed, the brutality directed against black people. And not just, overt, murders and violence, but keeping blacks in inferior segregated schools, keeping them out of good jobs, keeping them entirely out of the justice system, having separate facilities and accommodations for blacks and whites. So, we tend to, things were so wonderful in the 50s. Yeah, if you were a rich white guy like Donald Trump's dad, they were.
Yeah.
But they weren't so wonderful for ordinary folk.
Yeah. No, that makes total sense. Yeah, because I hear a lot of people say, this is the worst time to live. I'm like, I feel like this is the best time to be alive. Yeah, with medical stuff and just technology. It's just like, how could it be? We have a lot of things to work on, obviously, but.
Of course we do, and we always do. But, go back to the turn of the century, today lifespan is 25 years
more.
Greater.
Yeah. Yeah. No, exactly. Yeah. No, 77, I think it is. Well, what was I going to ask you? Well,
let's be winding down. I hope.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk about your pick. Give me your kind of, what is your, I'll put the link to the video also in the description too, so people can check out your video for New York Times. But I personally think Trump's going to win, especially after picking Kamala Harris as the vice president. Just because I gave him ammo, and then I know Biden agreed to 3 national debates. I thought the less Biden talked, the better he would have been off, I think, because
Hillary Clinton won all 3 debates by every poll and still lost the election. So let me tell you how I look at it, which is totally different from looking at who's up, who's down, looking at the individual candidates. Again, the insight behind my system is that elections are won or lost by governing by the party holding the White House, and the challenger doesn't matter.
Sure.
So in late 2019, Donald Trump was looking pretty good. Remember, on my system, it takes 6 keys to count out the party holding the White House. He was down 4. And then, as you know, of course, America gets hit with the COVID and with the cries for social and racial justice. And here's where Trump's misunderstanding of my keys comes in. Instead of dealing with these issues substantively, he thought he could revert to his 2016 playbook and talk his way out of it. Didn't work. The result is he's lost 3 additional keys.
Wow.
The short economy key, because we're in a recession.
Mm-hmm.
The long-term economy key, which is based on economic growth. And the social unrest key, because of what's raging across the land. So Donald Trump goes from 4 keys down, 2 keys short of a predicted defeat, to 7 keys down, 1 key more than needed to predict his defeat. So my final prediction is Donald Trump becomes the first sitting president since Bill Clinton beat George H.W. Bush in 1992 to lose a re-election bid. And significantly, never has the White House party suffered such a sudden and dramatic reversal of fortune in just a matter of a few months. And if Trump had listened to the keys, he might have saved himself.
Yeah, I think that's what the part is the fact that your prediction of the switch has only happened in like 3 to 5 month span. It wasn't.
Never see anything like it. To lose 3 keys in 5 months is just amazing.
Yeah, no, that is okay. Cool. So you got Biden winning in a landslide, I guess.
Yes, Trump losing and ipso facto Biden winning.
Okay, cool. All right. Well,
I like to put it. I'm not just being pedantic. I like to, because people often misunderstand this. The focus of my keys is always on the party holding the White House.
That makes total sense, though. I mean, the fact that, and those are 3 big keys that he lost: the social injustice, the long-term and short-term economy.
Big stuff.
Major stuff.
They don't turn around on a dime,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then November's in 2 months. So it's like, it's hard.
They're not turn around.
No. So is there any books that you want to plug? You want to talk about anything and anything that you do?
We talked about my repeal the Second Amendment, the case for a safer America. And just a few weeks ago, the 7th edition of my Keys book has come out. It's pretty good to get it. 7 editions. It's called Predicting the Next President, The Keys to the White House 2020, published by Rowman and Littlefield, available at bookstores and on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, Rowman and Littlefield.
All right, cool. I'm gonna get that book. I'm gonna get the Second Amendment one too, because I'm kind of interested in what you think. But I really appreciate you coming on, man, and taking the time to talk to me about this kind of stuff, because you're super smart. You've been around for a while, and you've done it your whole career. So I really appreciate that.
I'll leave you with one final thought.
Yes.
73. I've been doing this, as you know, for about 40 years,
mm-hmm.
and I still get butterflies in my stomach every time I do it. It's not an easy thing. And I'm one of the very few people who's been doing this for 40s, maybe the only one.
Yeah.
Maybe a few others, but very few. Putting yourself on the line every 4 years and knowing how you're going to get hit.
Yeah.
Other thing I want to just raise for you is, outside the keys or any prediction system, there are a couple of other things that give me butterflies. One is voter suppression. Are we going to have a free and fair election? Are we going to screw up the post office, which seems pretty badly screwed up already?
Yeah.
And then Russian intervention. They've had 4 years to do it even better. And we know, and I refer everyone to the incredible bipartisan report of the Senate Intelligence Committee controlled by Republicans, which is vastly better than that lame Mueller report, documenting what really happened in 2016. So we know Donald Trump will again welcome and exploit any Russian intervention. So those 2 things give me butterflies and keep me up at night.
Good. All right. Well, I'm going to look into that. I didn't know about the other report. I only knew about the Mueller report.
It's way better than the Mueller report.
What's it called?
I don't want to go off on the Mueller report. But
No, you're good.
It's one of the biggest disappointments of my lifetime, I have to say.
What's the other report called?
It's the report of the Senate Intelligence Committee. Just came out a week or 2 ago.
Oh, okay. That's
on Russian intervention in 2016.
Right. I'm going to check that out.
It called Paul Manafort a grave counterintelligence threat. Grave counterintelligence threat. It didn't pull punches like the Mueller report did.
Yeah, I said the Mueller report was kind of like, fugazi. I feel like.
Exactly. Who's going to read this?
Yeah. No, exactly.
All right. Gotta run.
All right. Thanks, buddy. I appreciate you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye, Alan.